When I pulled into my driveway after the long family reunion weekend, I felt a kind of tired peace settle over me. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the warm hugs, they all still echoed in my mind as I stepped into my small Portland apartment. I was ready to sink into the couch, maybe sip a cup of tea, and just let the quiet wrap around me. But that calm shattered the moment I opened my banking app to pay the electric bill. My heart stopped. $84.29. Just yesterday, I had over $9,000 sitting there. I blinked, refreshed the screen once, twice, 3 times. The numbers stayed the same. I felt the blood drain from my face as a cold knot formed in my stomach. My fingers fumbled as I called the bank, each ring drilling deeper into my chest. The customer service rep, polite but detached, said, "The withdrawals were made from a device previously logged into your account. Same IP address." My breath caught. That meant one thing: my mother's house. Without thinking, I snatched up my keys and rushed out the door, my heart pounding louder than the rain starting to fall outside. As I gripped the steering wheel and navigated the dark streets, one thought throbbed in my head. This can't be real. They wouldn't, would they? But deep down, I already knew. I was about to walk into a truth I had been avoiding for years, and there would be no turning back. I stood on my mom's front porch, my hand hovering over the doorbell. That old wooden door, with its peeling paint, had always meant warmth, safety, family. But tonight, it loomed in front of me like a wall I wasn't sure I could break through. When Emily opened the door, her face lit up with surprise. "Lisa! Back so soon?" she said, cradling a glass of red wine, her voice light and carefree. I stepped inside, my heart hammering. "Emily, we need to talk." Mark strolled in from the kitchen, a soda can in hand, a grin playing on his lips. He leaned against the fridge like this was just another lazy Sunday evening. "I checked my bank account," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's over $9,000 missing." Mark let out a low chuckle. "Relax, Liz. We just needed a little help. You've always been the responsible one." My chest tightened. I turned toward Mom, who sat knitting in her recliner, her eyes on the flickering TV. "Mom, did you know about this?" Without looking up, she let out a soft sigh. "Honey, you have more than you need. What's wrong with helping your family?" I felt the floor shift beneath me. My dad, planted in his armchair with a newspaper, didn't even glance over. "Don't be harsh, Lisa. It's just family business." I clenched my fists. "How did you even get into my account?" Emily shrugged like it was nothing. "You left it logged in on Mom's computer." It wasn't hard. My heart felt like it cracked wide open. They were treating this like I'd overreacted. It was my fault for trusting them. Mark took a sip of his drink. "It's not like we splurged. Rent, groceries, Haley's meds." I looked around the room, desperate for one face to show guilt, remorse, anything. But all I saw was expectation. My mind reeled back through the years, the countless late-night calls asking for help, the time I dipped into my savings for Emily's car down payment, the vacation I canceled to help Mark with rent, the medical bills, the emergencies, and not once, did anyone stop to ask how I was doing. My voice cracked. "You took everything." Emily tossed her hair and smirked. "You can make it back. Don't be so dramatic." I felt my purse slip from my shoulder as I backed toward the door. No one moved to stop me. No one asked if I was okay. Mom's voice floated after me, routine and gentle. "Don't forget Sunday dinner." My hand gripped the door handle. For a moment, I stood there, trembling, staring at the people I had called family. Then I turned, looked over my shoulder, and said quietly, "If you think I'm going to let this go, just wait." Emily giggled. "Oh, please, don't be so theatrical." Outside, the rain had picked up, soft and relentless. As I slid into the driver's seat, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. "We needed that money more than you." Their words echoed in my head, bouncing off every corner of my mind. I didn't go home right away. I drove to the edge of the city, parking near the trail where I usually jog on Saturdays. The car windows fogged up as I sat in the dark, the cold seeping into my bones. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old messages. Thank you texts that had turned into expectation, calls that had gone from occasional to constant. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being a daughter, a sister, a person. This wasn't just about money. This was about being seen, about being valued, about respect. And maybe, for the first time in my life, it was time to stand up for myself. The next morning, I sat at my small kitchen table, papers scattered everywhere, my laptop glowing in the dim light. My bank records, transfer receipts, old text messages, all laid out like pieces of a puzzle I no longer wanted to solve. As I highlighted suspicious transactions in angry red, a strange calm settled over me. I was no longer just a woman in shock. I was a woman drawing a line. For years, I had told myself they just needed help, that it was temporary, that it was love. But love doesn't take without asking. Love doesn't drain you dry and call it family. By late afternoon, I was back at my mother's house. My folder of evidence was clutched tightly in my hand as I stepped inside. The familiar scent of roast chicken drifted through the house, and the sounds of laughter floated from the dining room. For a moment, I almost turned back, but I couldn't. Not this time. I stepped into the dining room, where Emily scrolled through her phone, and Mark leaned back in his chair, a lemonade in hand. My father sat by the window, reading the paper, and my mother hummed softly in the kitchen. "I need to talk to all of you," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Emily didn't look up. "Lisa, can't this wait? It's Sunday dinner." "No, it can't." I placed the folder on the table. The papers fanned out like cards on a table. I went through every transaction. The withdrawals came from Mom's computer. I was here that day, yes, but I never logged into my bank account. So tell me, who did? The room fell silent. Mark sat down his glass with a soft clink. Emily let out a long sigh, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "You left it logged in, Lisa. It's not like we hacked you." I met her gaze. "So you admit it," she shrugged. "We just saw an opportunity. You always help anyway. What's the difference?" I felt something inside me snap. Not in anger, but in clarity. "The difference," I said quietly, "is consent. Helping is when someone asks and the other agrees. This was theft." Mom's soft voice drifted from the kitchen. "Lisa, sweetheart, you live alone, no kids, no debt. Emily's raising a child. Mark's still figuring things out. Family is about sharing." My throat tightened. "No, family is about trust, not entitlement." Dad finally folded his newspaper. His brow furrowed. "You've always been the strong one, Lisa. No one else could handle it. That's why they leaned on you." A sharp, bitter laugh escaped my lips. Leaned on me? Or bled me dry? Emily slammed her phone onto the table, her voice rising. "We didn't use it on vacations or luxuries, Lisa. It was rent, groceries, car repairs, Haley's doctor bills. We're exhausted, too." I looked at each of them, really looked. For years, I'd been so busy helping, I hadn't allowed myself to see the resentment buried behind their smiles, the expectation behind their gratitude. My voice shook. Not with rage, but with a deep, aching grief. I was exhausted, too. Working 60-hour weeks to help cover your debts, canceling my own vacations, skipping dinners, passing on things that brought me joy. And not one of you ever asked how I was doing. The clock on the wall ticked in the silence. I took a deep breath and reached for my folder. Before turning to leave, I paused, looking at my mother. "If this is how you treat the one person who never asked you for anything, don't be surprised when I finally stop giving." Mark chuckled, but it sounded forced now. "What are you going to do, Lisa? Call the cops?" I met his eyes, steady and unflinching. "Just wait and see." As I walked out the door, the cool air hit my face, and for the first time in years, I felt something unfamiliar, but welcome, rising in my chest. Not guilt, not shame, not fear. It was resolve. That night, I sat at my desk with a folder of documents spread out in front of me. My hands moved automatically, marking dates, highlighting transactions, cross-checking amounts. But my heart felt hollow. I had spent years telling myself that helping my family was just part of being a good daughter, a good sister. But sitting there in the quiet of my apartment, I realized I hadn't just been helping. I had been sacrificing. I pulled up my phone and scrolled through old texts. Emily's, "Hey sis, can you help with rent?" Mark's emergency, "Can you spot me $500? Mom's gentle sweetheart, "The electric bill is overdue again." And me, always replying, always sending, always covering. I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. The next morning, I walked into the police station, clutching my folder like a life raft. My palms were sweaty as I sat down across from a young officer named Harper. Her expression was kind, but firm as she flipped through the paperwork. "We'll open a case under unauthorized account access," she said, glancing up at me. "You've documented everything clearly. Do you have the names of the people involved?" My throat tightened as I nodded. "Yes, Emily and Mark Walker, Donna and Paul Grant, my parents." I left the station under a sky heavy with gray clouds, but inside me, something small flickered to life, a spark of relief. Not triumph, not revenge, just the quiet certainty that I had finally stopped pretending. Over the next few days, the calls started. First, it was Mom. "Lisa, honey, what's going on? Don't do this, we're family." Then Emily. "My accounts are you win, okay? Are you happy now?" And Mark. "Come on, Liz, you're blowing this out of proportion." I let every call go to voicemail. I didn't have the words for them yet, and maybe I never would. By the end of the week, Harper called with an update. "We've confirmed the unauthorized withdrawals. Emily and Mark are being investigated. Your parents used the funds for illegal mortgage payments, which may be subject to recovery." I sat in silence, my phone warm in my hand. I wanted to cry. Not out of joy, not even out of anger. Out of mourning. For the family I thought I had. For the people I had tried so hard to save. That evening, Mark called again. When I didn't answer, he sent an email. "Lisa, please. I've been suspended from work. They're investigating my accounts. Help me fix this." The arrogance from before, gone. The mockery, gone. All that remained was panic. But I didn't flinch. The next morning, Dad texted me. "The bank sent a foreclosure warning. If we can't pay in 30 days, we lose the house." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a cold statement. A last-ditch hope that I would swoop in like I always had. That night, I sat by my window, watching the rain blur the city lights. I thought about all the times I'd skipped lunch to wire Mom money, the dates I'd canceled because Emily needed me, the dreams I'd shelved for Mark's emergencies. I thought about all the times I gave, not just money, but pieces of myself. And then, I let it go. That weekend, I drove to the Oregon coast, a place I hadn't been in years. The wind off the ocean whipped through my hair as I stood on the sand, the salty air filling my lungs. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another message from Mom, another plea. But I didn't reach for it. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about how to fix someone else's crisis. I was just breathing, just standing, just being. I knew the hardest part was still ahead. They would call me cruel, ungrateful, selfish. They would say I had turned my back on family. But I also knew this. I was done carrying what was never mine to hold. As I watched the sun break through the clouds and shimmer across the water, I realized something I had never let myself believe before. I wasn't losing my family. I was finding myself. A few weeks later, I packed my life into the back of rented car and left Portland behind. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. For once, this chapter was mine alone to write. I drove across the state line to Colorado, to a small mountain town I had once passed through on a work trip. Back then, I only stayed for a few hours, sipping coffee in a quiet cafe, watching the sunlight dance on snow-capped peaks. But that memory had stayed with me, a small promise of peace I had never allowed myself to claim. My new apartment was small, just one room, with big windows that caught the morning light. But it felt like breathing fresh air after years underwater. I bought a used desk, filled the space with vases of fresh flowers, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, I didn't have to clear room for anyone else's needs. The first few days were quiet, unfamiliar. I went for long walks, letting the mountain air fill my lungs. I signed up for a pottery class at a little studio down the street. I learned to cook risotto, not because anyone asked, but because I wanted to. My phone still buzzed sometimes. Emily, Mark, Mom. I didn't block them, but I didn't answer either. The silence was a boundary I needed, a wall built not out of anger, but of survival. One afternoon, as I sat in the corner of the cafe I'd once visited, the owner walked by and smiled. "Weren't you here years ago?" he asked, tilting his head. "You asked about the jazz music we were playing?" I laughed softly. "That was me." He smiled back. "This place heals a lot of people." That night, I opened my laptop and began to write. I didn't plan to share it, but the words poured out anyway. The story of how I had given and given until I was empty, and how I had finally learned to say no. To my surprise, I posted it on a small blog I had barely used in years. And then, the messages started coming in. A college friend wrote, "I used to think you were just tough. Now I realize you were tired." A woman I barely remembered from a family party messaged, "You gave me the courage to stand up for myself. Thank you." Each word felt like a hand reaching through the dark, and for the first time, I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. One morning, as the sun poured through my window, I sat on the balcony with a cup of tea, watching the light dance across the mountains. My phone buzzed with a new message from Mom. "Lisa, please, we need to talk. Don't abandon us." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening, but not with guilt, with clarity. Even now, the house mattered more to her than the daughter who had helped keep it standing. I set the phone down and watched the sky change colors, feeling the quiet stretch out around me like a blanket. For the first time in years, I wasn't someone's emergency contact. I wasn't someone's backup plan. I was just me, and it was enough. The weeks passed, and with each sunrise over the Colorado mountains, I felt a little lighter. But the messages from my family didn't stop. First, it was Emily. "Haley's tuition is overdue. You win, okay? Are you happy now?" Then Mark. "They froze my accounts. You need to fix this." And Mom. Always soft, always pleading. "Lisa, please. Don't let us lose the house. We're family." But the house, I realized, was just a house. The family was supposed to be built inside it, and that part had crumbled long ago. One morning, as I watered the plants on my balcony, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Dad. His text was short, almost clinical. "The bank gave us 30 days. Without help, we lose everything. No apology, no regret. Just expectation." I sat down in the patio chair, the cool morning air brushing against my skin. I looked at the mountains, the vastness of the world stretching before me. And for the first time, I felt something shift deep inside. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was free. That night, I pulled out the old journal I'd packed in a box years ago. On the first page, I wrote, "I am not the family bank. I am Lisa." It was the first time I'd written my name, without it being attached to a transfer, a check, or a sacrifice. Days later, I received a message from someone I barely remembered. Melanie, a cousin-in-law from one of those chaotic birthday parties years ago. Her email was simple. "You probably don't remember me, but I wanted to say thank you. I was stuck in the same cycle with my family. Always giving, always breaking myself to keep them afloat. Seeing you stand up for yourself gave me the courage to finally do the same." I stared at her words, hands wrapped around a mug of tea gone cold. And for the first time, I felt something bloom inside. Not pride, not revenge, hope. I wasn't just breaking free for myself. I was lighting a path for others I didn't even know were watching. One crisp afternoon, as I strolled through the town square, I paused to watch a little girl riding her bike, her mother jogging behind her, laughter echoing through the autumn air. I felt a smile tug at the corners of my mouth, a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I used to believe love meant holding on tightly, no matter how much it hurt. I used to think being the good daughter, the good sister, meant giving until I had nothing left. But standing there, watching the sunlight dance across the cobblestones, I understood something so simple. It almost made me laugh. Sometimes love means letting go. I stopped hoping for an apology that might never come. I stopped waiting for them to understand. Maybe one day they would, maybe they wouldn't. And either way, I was okay. I bought a bright red dress I once thought was too much. I learned how to cook just for myself. I signed up for weekend hikes, pottery classes, coffee dates with new friends. Slowly, I stitched together a life that belonged to me, not to anyone else's expectations. One day, a postcard arrived from Kelly, an old coworker who had moved to Italy. On the back, she'd written, "Because of you, I finally had the courage to chase the dream I'd been putting off for years. Thank you, Lisa." I pinned it above my desk, next to a small collection of keepsakes, a stone from my first mountain hike, a pressed wildflower, the first pottery cup I'd made in class. None of them cost much, but they were the most precious things I owned because they were mine. The family I used to carry on my back hadn't disappeared. They were still there, still calling, still asking. But I had learned something they hadn't. You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. One golden afternoon, I sat on my balcony, the autumn leaves swirling in the wind. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Mom. I let it sit, untouched, while I watched the light fade across the sky. And in that quiet moment, I felt it, bone deep and certain. I was no longer the old Lisa. I was no longer the woman who gave until she was hollow. I was the woman who had finally learned to choose herself. As the days turned into weeks, I began to understand something I'd never been taught in all those years of bending, giving, and pleasing. Boundaries are not walls. They're doors you choose when and how to open. I used to think that saying no meant shutting people out, that it was cruel or selfish. But I've learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is knowing where you end and someone else begins. I still think about my family. I wonder if Emily ever figured out how to cover Haley's tuition, if Mark found a way to steady his life, if my parents sat in that old house, remembering the daughter who once answered every call. But now, when I think of them, there's no longer a tightness in my chest. There's no guilt, no ache to rush in and save the day. There's only a soft kind of grief for what I wished we had been, and an even softer gratitude for who I have become. In this new life, I've surrounded myself with people who ask how I'm doing, not just what I can do for them. Friends who check in, who celebrate small joys, who remind me that I am more than what I give. I've learned that love without respect is not love. It's control dressed up in obligation. And maybe the most beautiful discovery of all is this. When you stop trying to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it, you begin to notice the ones who already do. So if you're listening to this and you've ever felt like I did, overwhelmed, invisible, drained, I want you to hear me now. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to choose yourself. That's not selfish. That's survival. And sometimes, the first step to finding your true family is simply saying, enough. As I sit here, sipping tea on my little balcony, with the mountains spread out before me, I know I don't have all the answers. But for the first time in my life, I'm not afraid of what comes next. Because now, I'm not walking away from something. I'm walking toward myself.